At my grandfather's 90th birthday, my husband whispered, "That's not him." What started as a strange family reunion spiraled into a chilling discovery. I need to call the police. If this story pulled you in and you're just as curious as I was to uncover the truth behind the silence, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and stay with me. Together, we'll keep digging into the stories families hide and the strength it takes to face them. I hadn't seen my mother's eyes in 5 years. When I finally did, they didn't blink. Not when I hugged her. Not when I said, "It's good to be back." She just smiled, that tight, immovable smile. The kind that means you're here, but not really welcome. Elliot and I had flown from Vancouver to Georgia for my grandfather's 90th birthday. The invitation, if you could call it that, came wrapped in vague guilt and thinner affection. My mother's exact words were, "If you really want to see him, this might be your last chance." Like it was a favor, like she hadn't ignored my calls for 3 years. Still, I came. I came because I missed him, because he was the only one who ever made me feel like I belonged in that sprawling, whispering house full of secrets and family smiles, with knives tucked behind them. The party was already buzzing when we arrived. Paper lanterns dangled from tree branches. Jazz music drifted lazily from a Bluetooth speaker. Someone handed me a plastic flute of champagne without even looking at me. A little boy zoomed past us, pretending a paper plate was a steering wheel. It should have felt warm. It should have felt like home. Instead, it felt like walking into someone else's dream or their cover story. I stayed near the finger food table, pretending to care about cucumber sandwiches and grape skewers. Elliot hovered beside me, a glass of white wine untouched in his hand, scanning the crowd with that unreadable face he always wore when his brain was working overtime. He used to be an intelligence officer, calm under pressure, observant, quiet, too quiet now. My mother floated around in a sundress too young for her, reapplying her lipstick behind a napkin, hugging strangers and posing like she was hosting a charity gala. My father sulked near the grill, grumbling about the humidity like it was a personal insult. Aubrey, my younger sister, was nowhere to be found, of course, probably off somewhere being adored. Her husband stood laughing at something only he found funny. I kept trying to find something that felt real, and then they brought him out. Grandpa, or at least the man they said was him. He was in a wheelchair, sweater vest neatly pressed, white hair combed back like always. Everyone clapped like he was the damn guest of honor at the Oscars. I clapped too, reflexively, but something froze in me. He looked perfect, too perfect, skin too smooth, face too still. His hands rested on the armrests like mannequins. His eyes were distant, not confused, not alert, just absent, like he was listening to something only he could hear. I waved. He didn't wave back. I told myself it was age, maybe dementia, maybe he was just tired. But when I tried to approach, someone cut me off with a tray of hors d'oeuvres and a stiff smile. I backed off. My mom raised a glass. Her voice quivered just enough to make the moment about her. 90 years of wisdom, generosity, and love, she said. He built this family. He gave us everything. Some people wiped tears. Others nodded solemnly. The man in the chair blinked once. Beside me, Elliot didn't clap. Instead, he stared, unmoving, cold, focused. "Hey," I whispered, nudging him. "What's wrong?" He didn't respond, just kept watching. Grandpa? The imposter? I didn't know anymore. like he was memorizing every pore on the man's face. "Elliot," I said again. That's when he leaned toward me, his voice barely audible over the crowd. "Get your coat. We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." I blinked. Thought he was kidding. Maybe it was too much wine, maybe the jet lag. "You're serious?" I laughed nervously. He didn't smile. His eyes didn't move. "Now, Camille, get your bag, smile, walk inside, don't look back." My breath caught in my throat. "This is your paranoia talking," I whispered. "He's old, that's all. He's sick." Elliot finally turned to face me, his voice calm but anchored in stone. "That's not your grandfather." Everything in me went still. The air, the people, the laughter, it all faded into background static. And in that moment, surrounded by family and fake smiles, standing in a backyard I once played in barefoot, I realized something I hadn't dared to say out loud for years. I don't belong here, not anymore. And maybe I never did. We walked to the house like we were in a dream, me clutching my purse like it was a lifeline, Elliot silent beside me, jaw tight, steps exact. I didn't say a word until we were halfway up the stairs. "What do you mean, that's not him?" Elliot didn't answer. I followed him into the guest room and closed the door behind us. My hands trembled as I grabbed my overnight bag from the corner. I didn't even remember unpacking it. My mouth was dry, but my heart was worse, beating too fast, like it was trying to outrun the truth. "Elliot," I said again, "what the hell is going on?" He was already stuffing our things into the duffel, calm, efficient, like this was a drill, like he'd done it before. When he finally spoke, it wasn't loud, it was low, deadly clear. "That man in the chair is not Frederick Langston. I don't care what anyone says. That is not your grandfather." I stopped mid-zip. My mind flipped through the party, through the last half hour like I was rewinding a film reel too fast, clapping guests, champagne flutes, paper lanterns, forced smiles, Grandpa's hollow stare. "That's insane," I whispered. "He's just old. He's not himself anymore." "No, Camille," Elliot said, eyes locking on mine. "His face is different. His ears, his jawline. He's wearing glasses, which I've never seen him wear. And that beard? It's makeup. Light, but there. Subtle enough to pass a glance, but not past me." I wanted to laugh or scream or both. "You're telling me someone, what, hired a stand-in? Like this is some messed up play?" "I'm telling you," he said, voice steady. "I've been memorizing faces my entire career. I can tell you what a terrorist looked like from a grainy CCTV photo 10 years ago. I don't forget features, Camille. I never have." I stared at him, searching his face for any trace of doubt. There was none. And that terrified me. My fingers went numb as I zipped the bag all the way shut. "You think my family, what, swapped him out? Faked him?" My voice cracked. "Why would they do that?" "I don't know," he said, "but we both know they've kept you away for years." My knees gave slightly and I sat on the edge of the bed. 3 years. 3 years of unanswered calls, ignored messages, vague replies like, "He's tired," or "He's not up for talking." I told myself it was aging, that I was being dramatic, that I was always the sensitive one. But deep down, I'd always felt it. Something wasn't right. "He sent me birthday cards," I said weakly. 3 years ago. One had a check inside. He wrote, "Proud of you." Elliot's eyes softened. He kneeled in front of me, hands resting on my knees. I believe that. But that was 3 years ago. When was the last time you actually saw him? On a screen? In person? My throat closed. A Zoom call, I whispered, just before we moved to Vancouver. He joked about squirrels stealing his tomatoes. He was tired but sharp. Exactly, Elliot said. So ask yourself, who was that outside? I closed my eyes, but the image of the man in the wheelchair only burned brighter behind my lids. His stillness, his silence, his perfect sweater vest, his absence. When I opened my eyes, the light in the room had shifted. Shadows lengthened along the floral wallpaper. The air suddenly felt thick and still, like the calm before a storm. We can't just run, I said. If you're right, if this is really what it looks like, then we don't run, he said, standing up. We call. I stared at him. The police? I asked. He nodded. Once, my heart felt like it would burst. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold my phone. If we're wrong, we're not. But what if... Camille, he said softly. Better to be embarrassed than too late. My thumb hovered over the screen. I saw my mother's face flash in my mind, her rigid smile, her rehearsed tears. I remembered the way she told me, if you want to see him, come to the party, like it was some kind of test I had already failed. And then I remembered Grandpa's voice. Rough, warm, like cedar and peppermint tea. Hope this helps. Proud of you. That man outside had no voice, no spark, no soul. I pressed the call button. Elliot sat beside me, one hand on my back. I don't know if I'm about to ruin everything, I whispered, or save it. He didn't flinch. Either way, he said, you deserve the truth. And as the phone rang on the other end, I realized I wasn't scared of what we'd find. I was scared it might already be too late. I know this sounds insane, I told the dispatcher, gripping my phone like it might explode in my hand, but I think someone is impersonating my grandfather. I don't know where he is. I think he might already be gone. Please, just send someone. I expected her to hang up, or laugh, or worse, ask me to explain everything again, slower this time, like I was delusional. Instead, she simply said, officers are on their way. Stay where you are. I hung up and stared at the floor like it could give me answers. Elliot placed his hand on my back, steady, grounding. We're doing the right thing, he said. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I believed that yet. We sat in the car, parked along the gravel shoulder outside the estate, both of us stiff like statues. The party noise drifted on the breeze, muffled laughter, clinking glasses, the jazz still playing from someone's speaker, like none of this was happening. 5 minutes later, a black, unmarked SUV rolled up. 2 officers stepped out, plainclothes, calm and unreadable. They approached the window. Elliot did the talking. I was too busy trying to keep my lungs from collapsing. The taller officer asked for details. Elliot spoke plainly. He described the man in the chair, Grandpa's appearance from 3 years ago, the facial differences, the absence of speech. I chimed in as best I could, stumbling through the timeline, how I hadn't seen or spoken to my grandfather in 3 years, how I'd been told he was too tired or too ill every time I asked. I expected raised eyebrows, accusations. Instead, they just nodded. We'll take a look, the shorter one said. Then they walked toward the house like they were delivering a package. No lights, no sirens, just 2 men stepping into a lie. I couldn't breathe. The party didn't stop immediately. That was the worst part. No one screamed. No one bolted. It was subtler than that. A low, creeping tension, like someone had dimmed the whole backyard by a few degrees. People kept holding their drinks, but they weren't sipping. Their shoulders stiffened. Eyes darted. The air turned brittle, like glass stretched too thin. I watched through the windshield as the officers moved like chess pieces, one to my mother, the other toward the man in the wheelchair. Mom's face flickered, confusion, then something darker. She shook her head, started talking fast. Her hands moved, but not in the way I remembered. No warmth, no grounding, just empty motion. Dad stood off to the side, staring into the hedge like it might open up and swallow him whole. The man in the chair didn't move, not once, just stared straight ahead like a prop. Then they asked for ID. My mother disappeared into the house and came back with something. A passport? A driver's license? I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it didn't convince them. They leaned in again, speaking low, calm, too calm. I saw one officer kneel beside the wheelchair and ask something quietly. The man looked up, slowly, and said a few words. Then he nodded. That was it. No dramatic reveal, no mask pulled off, no screaming confession. Just a nod. And everything changed. One of the officers walked back toward our car. I rolled down the window, hands trembling on the crank. "Can you stay nearby?" he asked. "We'll contact you soon." "Wait," I said. My voice cracked. "Is it him? Is that my grandfather?" He paused. "We're still confirming some things," he said. "But you already know." He didn't have to say more. We did know. He turned and walked away, back toward the illusion collapsing under string lights and fake toasts. I sat in the passenger seat, every second pressing down on my chest like a weight. My breathing was shallow, forced. My mind ran in circles. "Where is he? Where is Grandpa?" I whispered it to myself, over and over, like a prayer or a curse. That night my phone rang. Caller ID. "Mom," I answered. I barely got out a hello before her voice pierced through the speaker. Sharp, furious. "How could you?" She was crying. Or yelling. Or both. I couldn't tell. "You called the police? On your own family. Do you know what you've done?" I swallowed hard. "What did you do?" I asked. "Where is he? Where is Grandpa?" Her silence was sudden and terrifying. Then she spat the words like venom. "You don't get to ask that. Not after what you've done." Click. She hung up. The silence afterward was louder than the call itself. I sat in the dark room of our hotel, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the mini-fridge filled the space where logic used to be. Then I heard Elliot's voice, quiet behind me. "You're not the one who did that." And for the first time in hours, I believed him. Just a little. When the knock came at 8:12 the next morning, I thought I might throw up. I wasn't dressed. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even moved from the edge of the bed, where I'd sat for hours with my phone clutched in my hand and my mind sprinting in circles. Elliot answered the door. It was the same two officers. I didn't want to hear what they had to say. I wanted them to say Elliot was wrong, that it was all just a misunderstanding, that my grandfather was fine, just old and quiet and tired. But that's not what they said. "There's been a voluntary statement made," the taller one began. His voice was slow, clinical, like he was reading off a report. "Your family claims that Mr. Frederick Langston passed away in March of 2020. They report natural causes. The body was privately buried. I don't remember standing. I just remember not feeling my legs anymore. I sat back down before I collapsed. The world was blurring around the edges. The words came out like smoke, curling, weightless, choking me. 3 years? Neither of them blinked. 3 years. I'd been sending birthday cards, asking to talk to him on Zoom, leaving voicemails that were never returned, telling myself he must be resting, too tired, too old, not up for it. All that time, he wasn't unavailable. He was dead. I don't remember what else I said to them. Maybe I asked if he suffered. Maybe I asked where he was buried. Maybe I just stared at the wall while the ground opened beneath me. The shorter officer offered me a small nod. We're treating this as an open investigation. The coroner will confirm the circumstances of death. But I wasn't listening anymore, because the story wasn't about death. It was about theft. The truth was like water breaking through a dam, flooding everything at once. They had kept it from me on purpose, not just the death, but the entire existence of it. They'd faked a birthday, faked a man, faked a legacy. And all of it was wrapped up in that house, in that name, in what Grandpa had built with his own hands. And I'd been mourning him in pieces, not even knowing I had the right. Elliot walked the officers out. When he returned, I was curled up on the floor beside the bed like a child. He sat beside me, didn't touch me, just stayed. That afternoon, the call came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but I did. The voice was warm, professional, soft, in a way that made me brace for impact. James Rivers? My name is David Roth. I was Mr. Langston's estate attorney. I've been trying to reach you for some time. I didn't respond. I couldn't. He continued gently, like he knew I was unraveling. Your grandfather left everything to you, Camille. The house, the business, the trust. My breath caught. No, that's not. There's no way. They didn't know. He paused. They did. He told them years ago, and just like that, everything clicked. That's why they'd kept me out. That's why my mother dodged my calls. That's why I wasn't allowed near him. That's why they hired someone to sit in his chair and pretend. Because if I knew he was gone, they'd lose everything. They hadn't just lied. They looted him. They paraded his memory like a puppet on strings just to keep living in a house that wasn't theirs, using money that wasn't meant for them, pretending I didn't exist. I hung up without saying goodbye. My chest was fire. I called my mother. I didn't know what I expected. An apology, maybe, some cracked confession, something that sounded like grief. She answered. Her voice didn't waver. How dare you? She hissed. Not sorrow, not regret, just rage. You called the police on your family. You humiliated us. You have no idea what you've done. I cut her off. Where is he? What did you do with his body? Her pause was like a door slamming. You don't get to ask that. You weren't there. I asked every year, I said, my voice breaking. And you lied. Every time. We were protecting him. And you. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that tasted like blood in my mouth. You didn't protect him. You buried him in silence and robbed him blind. She hung up. I sat in that silence for a long time. And for the first time since I got on that plane, I stopped wondering if I was the problem. Wasn't. They were. And this time, they weren't getting away with it. The investigation moved slow at first, too slow. For days, I felt like I was holding my breath underwater, while everyone else went on sipping cocktails by the pool. I kept expecting someone, anyone, to knock on my hotel door and say, "Sorry, this has all been a mistake." But that knock never came. Instead, subpoenas did. Depositions followed, and so did silence. Aubrey stopped posting on social media. My mother, once glued to her wine club and garden parties, disappeared from every digital corner. Even Dad, usually loud and bumbling, faded into the background like a ghost in a bad painting. When the coroner's report came back, the conclusion was what they'd claimed: natural causes. Grandpa had died quietly in his sleep. No trauma, no foul play, just the slow fade of age. And that's when I cried. Not out of shock, but because it was real now. Because I finally had permission to mourn the man they'd hidden from me. Because the loss finally had shape, had weight. Because the man who used to carve me wooden animals and sneak me butterscotch candies when Mom wasn't looking was really, truly gone. But grief didn't have time to breathe, because the fraud, that was just beginning. Failing to report a death, withholding information, illegally accessing funds, identity deception. The words looked like a corporate scandal, but this wasn't business. This was family, my family. The people who once taught me how to ride a bike and took me to Sunday school. Now, they were the names on case files. And then came the hearing. Not a dramatic trial, no courtroom gasps or slammed gavels, but a slow, grinding legal process that stripped the gloss from everything they'd tried to protect. The court ordered them to vacate the house. Not a suggestion, a mandate. They had 2 weeks. I didn't go watch. I didn't want to see my childhood furniture wrapped in plastic, or hear my mother bark orders while pretending this was just a misunderstanding. I only showed up when it was done. The driveway was empty, the garden overgrown, the windows dusty, the front door locked but waiting. Inside, the house was eerily still. No voices, no perfume, no warmth. Just rooms that had witnessed too much and said nothing. I walked through it like a museum of things I couldn't feel anymore. The hall where Grandpa used to push me in a laundry basket. The window bench where I cried after my first heartbreak. The kitchen where Mom once slapped my hand for stealing cookie dough, now dark and cold. They left no apology, no explanation, just a single sheet of paper on the kitchen counter, folded once, no envelope. You've always been good at taking what you didn't earn. No signature, just venom on cheap stationery. I held it for a second, then I burned it in the sink. The flames curled the words into smoke, and I watched them vanish. That night, I opened a bottle of red wine and sat in Grandpa's old recliner. The leather still smelled like cedar and age. I pulled my feet up under me and stared out at the backyard. The lanterns were gone, but the trees still swayed like they remembered. Elliot sat across from me, quiet. "I don't feel triumphant," I said. "You're not supposed to," he replied. "I don't even feel angry anymore," I added. "Just dismissed." He nodded. "Because that's what they did to you. For years." I blinked back tears. "I just wanted to be let in," I whispered. "Not even chosen, just included." Elliot didn't say anything. He reached across the coffee table, took my hand. We sat there in silence. Not revenge, not justice, just two people holding space for the wreckage of a family that chose power over truth. I haven't spoken to my mother since, or Aubrey, not even a text. Sometimes I wonder if I should have fought harder. gone to the press, dragged them into the spotlight they were so desperate to keep for themselves. Other times I wonder if I didn't go far enough. But then I look around this house, his house, and I remember the way Grandpa used to squeeze my hand twice before letting go. It meant, I love you. And even now, I feel it in the walls. That's enough. The first night I slept in the house, I didn't dream. It was strange how quiet it was, not just the absence of noise, but the kind of stillness that settles after a war ends. Not peace, not yet, just the echo of everything that had been broken. I didn't unpack. I didn't even go upstairs. I curled up in Grandpa's chair, a blanket over my shoulders, a glass of wine in my hand, and stared at the fireplace that hadn't been lit in years. I let the silence stretch long and sharp until it didn't feel like punishment anymore. This wasn't victory. It wasn't even closure. It was survival. In the days that followed, I met with lawyers, bankers, a restoration team for the property. Every folder I signed, every account I transferred, felt like peeling back layers of someone else's deception. There were debts. There were misused funds. Aubrey had dipped into the business accounts. My father had borrowed from the trust. My mother had taken over the property as if she were the executor. None of them were. I was. I walked through the office one afternoon and found an old cigar box tucked in the corner of Grandpa's desk. Inside were letters, handwritten, unsent, all addressed to me. Camille, don't let them make you feel like you're hard to love. You always saw through the noise. You didn't walk away. You just refused to beg to stay. I cried so hard, my ribs ached. He knew. Even when I thought I was invisible, forgotten, he knew, and he tried. God, he tried to reach me. I stayed in the house for 3 more weeks, long enough for the paint to crack and the truth to settle. I hired a forensic accountant. I let the district attorney's office comb through everything. The fraud charges stuck, but the consequences were light. Probation, monitored access, a slap on the wrist for 3 years of silence, no jail time. I didn't fight it. I didn't want vengeance anymore. What would be the point? They'd already sentenced themselves, chained to their own shame, their own emptiness. I received one final message from my mother, an email, cold, precise. If you had stayed, none of this would have happened. I didn't reply, because what she really meant was, if you had stayed quiet, we'd still have everything. And that was the final thread I needed to cut. I closed the laptop. I walked through the house one last time, room by room, memory by memory. I said goodbye in my own quiet way to the girl who once stood on her tiptoes to help Grandpa stir cookie batter, to the teenager who ran crying from the kitchen after Mom told her to stop being so emotional, to the woman who once believed she had to earn love by staying small and silent. I stood in the foyer, hand on the doorknob, the light slanting just right across the hardwood floor, and I whispered something I hadn't allowed myself to say out loud. I did nothing wrong, and I meant it. I went back to Vancouver, back to Elliot, back to the life I had built without their approval. I didn't bring the house with me. I kept it, yes, but I didn't cling to it. I hired a local team to maintain it, restore it. One day, maybe, it would be something more than a monument to betrayal. A few months later, I got a letter from a young woman who worked at the retirement center down the road from the Langston property. She'd found a small wooden horse in a donation box, hand-carved, initials FL scratched into the bottom. She returned it with a note. This felt like it belonged to someone who still loved him. I keep it on my desk now, not as a trophy, not as a warning, but as a reminder that I was never crazy, never dramatic, never too much. I was just the only one who didn't agree to lie. Sometimes people ask me if I ever talk to them, my mother, my sister, my father. I don't. Not because I hate them, but because I finally learned what Grandpa tried to teach me all along. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer, and sometimes the only thing more powerful than truth is choosing not to let someone steal it. In the end, this wasn't a story about inheritance or revenge. It was about truth, dignity, and the quiet strength it takes to stand alone. Camille didn't reclaim a house, she reclaimed her voice. What her family buried wasn't just her grandfather, it was honesty, legacy, and love. But the truth has a way of rising, even through silence. And in choosing not to become like them, Camille honored the man who always believed in her. This story reminds us sometimes the greatest justice isn't punishment, it's walking away with your soul intact.